The police officer didn't hand me a gun, or a badge, or a file. He handed me a clear plastic evidence bag. Inside it lay 2 pieces of twisted, jagged aluminum. They were covered in dried, rust-colored stains. It took me a second to realize what I was looking at. They were my father's crutches. And they hadn't just been broken, they had been used as a weapon. I looked through the glass of the ICU room at the man hooked up to the ventilator. My father, a decorated veteran, beaten into a coma with the very things he needed to walk. Hit like, subscribe for more betrayal stories, and comment your city or country. The steady beep, beep, beep of the heart monitor was the only sound in the room. It was a rhythmic countdown, a reminder that Victor, the strongest man I had ever known, was hanging on to life by a thread. I stood there, gripping the edge of the bed so hard my knuckles turned white. My reflection in the darkened window didn't look like a billionaire tech mogul or a tier 1 ranger. I made sure of that. I was wearing a faded denim jacket, dirty work boots, and a 3-day beard. To the world, and especially to the people in this town, I was just Hunter, the prodigal son who ran away to the army and came back with nothing. "I'm sorry, sir," the young deputy said behind me. He looked nervous. "The break-in happened 2 nights ago. We think it was junkies looking for prescription meds. Your father," he tried to fight back. I turned slowly. "Junkies?" I asked, my voice scraping against my throat. "Junkies don't beat a disabled old man halfway to death and leave the TV on the wall. Junkies don't shatter aluminum crutches on a human skull unless they enjoy it." The deputy shifted his weight. "We're investigating all leads." "You do that?" I said, turning back to my dad. His face was a map of violence. Purple swelling shut his left eye. His lip was split and stitched. But it was his hands that killed me. His hands, usually rough and strong from working wood, were bruised defensively. He had tried to cover his head. He had been scared. The door behind me whooshed open. The air in the room instantly changed. It smelled heavy, like cheap perfume and old cigarettes. "Hunter," a shrill voice cried out. "Oh my God, Hunter, is that you?" I didn't have to turn around to know it was Morgan, my stepmother, the woman who had moved into our ranch 6 months after my mom died, bringing her deadbeat son, Felix, with her. She rushed over, throwing her arms around me. Her body felt stiff, theatrical. She was shaking, but it didn't feel like grief. It felt like adrenaline. "Look at him," she sobbed, pulling away to gesture at my dad. "My poor Victor. I told him to get a security system. I told him." Behind her, leaning against the doorframe, was Felix. He was chewing gum, scrolling on his phone. He looked up at me, his eyes scanning my dirty boots and cheap jacket. A smirk touched the corner of his mouth. "Long time no see, soldier boy," Felix said. "Heard you were working security at a mall in Jersey or something. Dad said you were broke." I kept my face perfectly still. That was the lie I had fed them for years. It was safer if they thought I was a failure. "I'm here now," I said quietly. "Yeah, well, a little late," Felix scoffed. "Unless you got money for the medical bills." "No, didn't think so." Morgan swatted Felix's arm playfully, not angrily. "Hush, Felix. Hunter is grieving." She turned back to me, her eyes wet, but her pupils sharp, calculating. It was terrifying. "Hunter. I was at the grocery store. I came home and found him like this. There was blood everywhere. The police said they must have been on drugs. They kept hitting him." I looked at her. I used my training, the same training that taught me to read high-value targets in interrogation rooms overseas. Her hands were trembling, but she wasn't wringing them in despair. She was picking at her cuticles, a sign of suppressed anxiety, not sorrow. And there was a scratch on her neck. Fresh, thin, like a fingernail had raked across it. "Where were you again?" I asked. "The grocery store," she said quickly. Too quickly. "I have the receipt." "Right," I said. "And Felix?" "I was at the gym," Felix said, puffing out his chest. "Bro, if I was home, those junkies would be dead. Trust me." I looked at Felix's knuckles. They were red. "Raw. Rough workout?" I asked, nodding at his hands. Felix hid his hand in his pocket instantly. Heavy bag work. Forget to wrap my hands sometimes. You know how it is. Yeah, I lied. I know. I didn't stay long after that. The air in that room was suffocating. I needed to see the crime scene. I needed to see the house where I grew up, the house my father built with his own 2 hands before the war took his legs and the accident took his mobility. I drove my rental truck, a beat-up Ford, to the ranch. The police tape was still fluttering across the front porch in the wind. I ducked under it. The front door had been kicked in. That part supported their story. Splinters of wood littered the entryway. I walked into the living room. It was a mess. Drawers pulled out, papers scattered. But something was wrong. I stood in the center of the room, closing my eyes, visualizing the attack. If junkies wanted drugs, they go to the bathroom medicine cabinets or the bedroom. Why was the violence here, in the living room? I looked at the floor. The carpet was old, a Persian rug my mom had bought 30 years ago. There was a large, dark stain near the recliner where Dad usually sat. But next to it, the carpet was wet, and it smelled distinct. I crouched down, touching the wet fibers. Bleach. Someone had tried to scrub the blood out. Junkies don't bring cleaning supplies. Junkies don't try to hide the mess. They run. This was a panic clean. Someone hit him, realized there was too much blood, tried to clean it, and then realized it was hopeless and staged the robbery instead. My heart began to hammer against my ribs. This wasn't a robbery. This was an execution that failed. I walked over to my dad's recliner. It was overturned. I set it upright. The leather was slashed. I remembered something. Years ago, when Dad first lost his mobility, he became paranoid about being helpless. He told me once, during a phone call I made from a satellite phone in Afghanistan, "Hunter, if anything happens, check the chair." I keep my ears open. I felt under the armrest. Nothing. I felt under the seat cushion. Nothing. I dropped to my knees and felt the underside of the chair frame. My fingers brushed against something plastic. Tape. I pulled it free. It was a small, digital voice recorder, taped securely to the metal frame of the recliner. My dad, the old paranoid fox, recorded his conversations when he felt unsafe. I sat on the floor, surrounded by the wreckage of my childhood home. The silence of the house was heavy, ghostly. Outside, the wind howled against the siding. I pressed the small play button. First, there was static. Then, the sound of a door opening. Not kicked in, opening. "Please." My father's voice came through the tiny speaker. He sounded tired. "Morgan, you can't sell the land. It's for Hunter. It's in the trust." "Hunter isn't here, Victor." Morgan's voice screamed. It wasn't the sweet, grieving voice from the hospital. It was demonic. "He's a loser. He's gone. We need the money now." "I won't sign," Dad said. Then, a heavy thud. "Make him sign, Felix," Morgan hissed. I heard a metallic clatter. The sound of crutches being snatched away. "Look at you," Felix's voice sneered. "Can't even stand up. You think you're a man? You're just a cripple." "Give me my crutches," Dad warned. His voice was shaking. "You want him?" Felix laughed. "Here. Catch." A sickening crack echoed through the recording. The sound of aluminum hitting bone. My dad screamed. A sound of pure agony that made my blood freeze in my veins. "Sign the paper, old man." Felix yelled. "Thwack! Thwack! Stop! I'll sign." Dad cried out, his voice gurgling. "Too late," Morgan whispered. "Finish him, Felix. Make it look like a break-in." I stopped the recording. I sat there in the dark living room, the device trembling in my hand. A cold, dark calm washed over me. The tears that had been threatening to fall earlier vanished. They were replaced by something else. Something I hadn't felt since my last deployment. I wasn't a son grieving a tragedy anymore. I was a ranger acquiring a target. Morgan and Felix thought they had beaten a helpless old man and his loser son. They had no idea they had just declared war on a ghost. I put the recorder in my pocket and stood up. I didn't take the recording to the police station immediately. That was the rookie move, the civilian move. I had seen the way the deputy at the hospital looked at Morgan, with sympathy, not suspicion. And I knew small towns. The sheriff, Dominic, had been the high school quarterback when I was in the AV club. We weren't friends then, and if Morgan had him wrapped around her finger, we certainly wouldn't be friends now. I needed to know the layout of the battlefield before I fired a shot. I drove back to the motel where I was staying. It was a roach motel on the edge of town, the kind of place where people paid in cash and didn't ask questions. Perfect cover. I opened my duffel bag, the only piece of expensive gear I had allowed myself to bring. Inside, hidden under a pile of stained t-shirts, was a laptop that cost more than the motel itself. I booted it up, bypassing the local insecure Wi-Fi and connecting directly to my Starlink satellite network. My fingers flew across the keyboard. First, I pulled the financial records for Victor's Auto Repair, my dad's business. Morgan had run it into the ground. Then I pulled Morgan's bank statements. She was hemorrhaging money. Online gambling, luxury handbags, payments on a sports car for Felix. They were broke. Desperate. That explained why they needed the ranch sold so badly. Then, I looked up Sheriff Dominic. He had a gambling debt too. Significant. And 3 months ago, a large cash deposit hit his account. The source was untraceable, but the timing aligned perfectly with when Morgan took out a second mortgage on the house, a mortgage my dad definitely didn't sign for. Compromised, I whispered to the empty room. The police were out. The next morning, I put on my costume. I chose a flannel shirt with a hole in the elbow and jeans that were 2 sizes too big, making me look smaller, frielier. I hunched my shoulders, hiding the muscle I'd built over a decade of combat. I needed to look like prey. I went back to the house. Morgan and Felix were there, meeting with a realtor. I'm telling you, the market is hot. The realtor, a woman named Clara, was saying as they stood on the porch. With the oil rights included, this property will go for millions. We just want it sold fast, Morgan said, puffing on a thin cigarette. Too many bad memories now. I walked up the driveway, dragging my feet in the gravel. Hey, I said, my voice cracking a little. What's going on? Morgan spun around, annoyance flashing in her eyes before she masked it with a fake smile. Hunter, we're just discussing options. For your father's care. Medical bills are going to be astronomical. You're selling the ranch? I asked, widening my eyes. But Dad loves this place. Dad isn't going to be walking again. Hunter, Felix said, stepping off the porch. He was wearing a tight t-shirt that showed off his gym muscles. He thought he was intimidating. He's going to be a vegetable. We need cash to put him in a home. A home? I stammered. I thought we could take care of him here. Felix laughed, a cruel, barking sound. He stepped into my personal space. I could smell the stale beer on his breath from the night before. Felix poked a finger into my chest. You got a job, Hunter? You got a house? No, you got nothing. You're a burden, just like him. My instinct, honed by years of hand-to-hand combat drills, screamed at me to grab his finger, snap it backward, and drive my elbow into his throat. It would take less than 2 seconds to incapacitate him. I forced myself to flinch instead. I stumbled back, looking down at my boots. I want to help, I mumbled. Then stay out of the way, Morgan said coldly. Go back to the hospital. Sit with him. Leave the business to the adults. I need to get some clothes from my old room, I said. Fine. 5 minutes, Morgan snapped. Then get off the property. The realtor needs to take photos. I walked past them, keeping my head down. As I passed Felix, he stuck his foot out. I saw it coming a mile away. I let myself trip, catching myself on the doorframe. Watch your step, loser, Felix chuckled. I entered the house and went straight to my old room. But I didn't grab clothes. I grabbed my dad's old toolbox from the closet. I needed to plant the bugs. I moved quickly. I placed a tiny listening device behind the headboard in the master bedroom, another under the kitchen table, another in the living room vent. They were military grade, smaller than a dime, with a battery life of 6 months. As I was finishing up in the kitchen, I heard them come back inside. When do we get the money? Felix asked. As soon as the old man dies. Morgan lowered her voice, but the bug picked it up perfectly on my earpiece. Or as soon as we get power of attorney. If he wakes up, It complicates things. He won't wake up, Felix said confidently. I hit him hard, Mom. I heard his skull crack. Don't say that out loud, you idiot, she hissed. And what about Hunter? He's sniffing around. Hunter? Felix scoffed. Please. Did you see him flinch? He's pathetic. He's scared of his own shadow. If he causes trouble, I'll deal with him the same way I dealt with Victor. I was standing in the hallway, listening. A cold smile spread across my face. Good, I thought. Underestimate me. Think I'm weak. Think I'm scared. I walked out of the room, clutching a bag of old clothes. I'm leaving, I called out. Don't come back without calling first, Morgan yelled from the kitchen. I walked to my truck. As I opened the door, a black SUV pulled up. It was Sheriff Dominic. He got out, adjusting his belt. He looked at me, squinting against the sun. Hunter, he nodded. Not friendly. Guarded. Sheriff, I said. Tragedy about your dad, he said flatly. We're doing everything we can. I know, I said. Morgan told me it was junkies. Dominic paused. He looked at the house, then back at me. That's the working theory. Best you don't play detective, son. Leave it to the professionals. You don't want to get in the way of an active investigation. It was a warning, a subtle threat. I'm just visiting, I said, getting into the truck. I'm heading back to Jersey in a few days. Good plan, Dominic said. This town, it eats people up if they stay too long. I drove away, watching him in the rearview mirror. He walked up to the porch, and I saw Morgan come out to greet him. She touched his arm familiarly. Too familiarly. I drove until I was out of sight, then pulled over onto a dirt road. I opened my laptop again. Okay, Morgan, I whispered, typing in a command. Let's see what you really own. I initiated the sequence. It was a program I had designed myself, an asset seizure protocol used for freezing terrorist funding. But today, I was using it on a housewife and a gym rat. I hit enter. On the screen, a progress bar appeared, initiating foreclosure purchase. I wasn't just going to beat them. I was going to buy the roof out from over their heads. And the best part? They wouldn't know it was me until it was too late. My phone buzzed in my pocket 3 days later. It was a notification from my private bank in Zurich. Transaction complete. I sat on the edge of the motel bed, staring at the screen. I now own the promissory note for the ranch. I own the mortgage. I effectively own them. But financial ruin wasn't enough. I needed them to feel the walls closing in before I crushed them. I drove to the hospital. The nurses had started to recognize me, the quiet son in the flannel shirt who sat for hours without speaking. Today, though, the atmosphere in the ICU was different. There was a flurry of activity around room 304. My heart seized. Did he die? I broke into a run, ignoring the no running signs. I burst into the room. My dad's eyes were open. He looked terrible, gaunt, pale, his left eye still swollen shut, but his good eye, the right one, darted toward me. It was filled with confusion and fear. Dad, I whispered. The doctor, a kind man named Dr. Evans, stepped aside. He woke up about an hour ago, Hunter. He's disoriented, and his speech is slurred due to the swelling, but he's conscious. I rushed to the bedside. Dad, it's me. It's Hunter. Victor tried to lift his hand, but he was too weak. He made a guttural sound in his throat. I leaned in close, putting my ear near his mouth. More gone, he rasped. I know, I whispered back, gripping his hand gently. I know everything. His eye widened. He tried to shake his head, a tiny, painful movement. Dan, Gur, I can handle them, I said. He squeezed my hand with surprising strength. Run, he breathed. It broke my heart. Even now, beaten and broken, he was trying to protect me. He still saw me as his little boy. He didn't know who I had become. I'm not running, Dad, I said, my voice low and hard. I'm staying, and I'm going to fix this. I stayed with him until he fell back asleep. When I walked out into the hallway, I saw Morgan coming off the elevator. She was wearing a new dress, holding a designer coffee cup. She looked like she was going to a brunch, not visiting her husband in the ICU. She stopped when she saw me. Her face went pale for a split second before the mask slid back into place. "He's awake," I said. The coffee cup trembled in her hand. "What? That's wonderful." "Is it?" I asked. "Of course it is." "What did he say?" "Did he say who did it?" Her voice was high, pitched with panic. "He's confused," I lied. "Doesn't remember much. Just mumbled about the lights going out." I watched her shoulders drop. Relief. "She bought it." "Oh, poor dear," she sighed. "Trauma does that. The doctor said memory loss is common." "You look nice," I said, eyeing her dress. "Oh, this." She smoothed the fabric. "I have a meeting. With the bank. Trying to sort out your father's accounts. It's a nightmare, Hunter. You wouldn't understand." "Good luck," I said. "Banks can be tricky." She brushed past me, eager to verify my story with the doctors. I walked to the elevator, a dark smirk playing on my lips. "Go ahead, Morgan. Go to your meeting." An hour later, I was parked across the street from the First National Bank of Texas. Through the tinted windows of my truck, I watched Morgan and Felix walk in. They walked with a swagger. They thought they were about to cash in. I put on my earpiece. I had hacked into the bank manager's phone earlier that morning. A simple Bluetooth exploit. I listened. "Mrs. Sterling," the bank manager, Mr. Henderson, said. His voice was apologetic. "I don't know how to tell you this, but we can't extend your line of credit." "What do you mean?" Morgan's voice was sharp. "My husband has perfect credit. We have equity in the ranch." "That's the thing," Henderson said. "The mortgage on the ranch was sold this morning." "Sold?" Felix interrupted. "To who?" "A private holding company. Valkyrie Holdings." "Who the hell is Valkyrie Holdings?" Morgan demanded. "I don't know," the manager said. "But they've invoked the acceleration clause. They're calling in the full loan. Effective immediately." "That's impossible," Morgan screamed. "We don't have $300,000. "Then they will begin foreclosure proceedings in 48 hours, Henderson said. "I'm sorry. My hands are tied." I watched them storm out of the bank. Morgan looked like she was going to vomit. Felix was kicking the tire of her car, screaming obscenities. I took a sip of my lukewarm coffee. Valkyrie Holdings. A shell company I named after my old unit. They were panicked now. Panic makes people sloppy. Panic makes people make mistakes. My phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. "Meet me at the old sawmill. Midnight. Come alone." I stared at the message. It could be a trap. It probably was a trap, but it was also an opportunity. I went back to the motel and opened a locked case under the bed. I took out my sidearm, a suppressed Sig Sauer P226, and a combat knife. I tucked the knife into my boot and holstered the gun at the small of my back, hidden under the baggy flannel shirt. At 11:55 p.m., I parked my truck a mile away from the sawmill and hiked in through the woods. I moved silently, using the night vision goggles I had borrowed from my last deployment. The world turned green and crisp. The sawmill was a rotting skeleton of wood and rusted metal. A single car was parked in the clearing. The headlights were off. I circled the perimeter, checking for snipers or lookouts. Clear. I moved closer, keeping to the shadows. I saw a figure leaning against the car, smoking a cigarette. It wasn't Felix. It wasn't Morgan. It was Sheriff Dominic. I stepped out of the woods, my hand hovering near my back. "You're loud for a ranger," Dominic said without turning around. "I let you hear me," I replied. He turned, dropping the cigarette and crushing it under his boot. "We need to talk, Hunter. Off the record." "About what?" "About your stepmother," Dominic said. "She came to me today. She's scared. She says someone bought her debt. She thinks it's a rival rancher trying to squeeze her out." "Sounds like bad luck," I said. Dominic took a step closer. "Cut the crap." I looked into Valkyrie Holdings. "It's a ghost. But the IP address for the purchase? It routed through a satellite signal. The kind civilians don't have." He looked at me, really looked at me, for the first time. "You're not broke, are you?" I didn't answer. "Listen," Dominic said, his voice lowering. "I know Morgan is dirty. I know she's been bleeding your dad dry. But I can't prove it. And now she's desperate. A desperate animal bites. Why are you telling me this? I asked. I saw you at her house. You're on her payroll. Dominic flinched. I took a loan from her. Once. To pay for my wife's surgery. I'm not proud of it. But I didn't know she was going to do this to Victor. Victor is a good man. If you're so noble, arrest her, I said cold. I can't. Not without evidence. Real evidence. The video, he said. What video? The neighbor, Mrs. Gable. She has a camera pointed at your dad's driveway. Morgan knows about it. She paid Mrs. Gable to delete the footage from that night. But Mrs. Gable, she's a hoarder. She keeps everything. My pulse spiked. Does she still have it? She might, Dominic said. But Morgan is sending Felix over there tonight to make sure the hard drive is destroyed. If you want it, you better get there first. Why didn't you go? I asked suspiciously. Because if I go without a warrant, it's inadmissible in court. But you're just a concerned son visiting a neighbor. Dominic smirked. Go get M, Ranger. I didn't say goodbye. I turned and sprinted into the woods, heading for my truck. The race was on. I drove like a madman. The speedometer on the rental truck rattled as I pushed it past 80 on the winding back roads. Mrs. Gable lived 2 miles down the road from our ranch. If Felix was already there, things were about to get ugly. I killed the headlights as I turned onto Mrs. Gable's gravel driveway. The house was dark, a small, rundown cottage surrounded by piles of junk, old cars, stacks of newspapers, rusted appliances. A hoarder's paradise. I saw Felix's sports car parked near the front porch. The driver's side door was open. I bailed out of the truck and moved toward the house, drawing my knife. I didn't want to use the gun unless I had to. Gunshots brought questions I couldn't answer yet. I heard shouting from inside. Where is it, you old hag? Felix's voice. I don't know what you're talking about. Get out. Mrs. Gable screamed. I slipped onto the porch, avoiding the creaky boards. The front door was ajar. I peered inside. The living room was a claustrophobic maze of stacked magazines and boxes. In the center, Felix was looming over Mrs. Gable, a frail woman in her 70s. He had grabbed her by the collar of her nightgown. The hard drive. Felix roared, shaking her. Mom said you kept backups. Give it to me, or I'll burn this whole trash heap down with you inside. It's in the back room, she cried, terrified. In the safe. Just let me go. Felix shoved her onto a pile of old clothes. Go get it. Now. She scrambled up and ran toward the back of the house. Felix pulled out a lighter, flicking it open and closed. He looked around at the stacks of dry paper everywhere. He was enjoying this. I stepped into the room. Felix, I said. My voice was calm, conversational. He spun around, the lighter dropping from his hand. Hunter? What the hell are you doing here? Helping a neighbor, I said. You should try it sometime. It's better for the soul than assaulting grandmothers. Felix laughed, but it was nervous. You followed me? You stalking me, loser? I'm giving you a chance to leave, I said. Walk away. Don't come back. Or what? Felix sneered. He reached into his waistband and pulled out a baton, a collapsible steel stick. He flicked his wrist, and it snapped open with a metallic clack. You gonna cry to Daddy? Oh wait, Daddy can't hear you. He lunged. It was a sloppy attack. An overhand swing meant to break a collarbone. I didn't even draw my knife. I stepped inside his guard, caught his wrist with my left hand, and drove my right palm into his solar plexus. The air left his lungs in a wet whoosh. He doubled over. I twisted his wrist, forcing the baton from his grip. It clattered to the floor. You're fast, he wheezed, looking up at me with genuine shock. For a mechanic. I learned a few things in Jersey, I said. I didn't want to reveal my full skill set yet. I pushed him backward. Get out. Felix scrambled back, clutching his chest. His eyes darted between me and the back room where Mrs. Gable had gone. He realized he couldn't fight me and find the drive at the same time. This isn't over, he spat. You and your dad, you're both dead. He turned and ran out the door. I heard his car tires spin on the gravel as he peeled away. I waited until the sound of the engine faded before I went to the back room. Mrs. Gable was huddled in the corner, clutching a small, external hard drive to her chest. Is he gone? She whispered. He's gone, I said gently. I'm Hunter, Victor's son. She looked at me, her eyes filling with tears. I know who you are. You look just like him. Before the war. She held out the drive. I saw it, she said, her voice trembling. I saw what they did. I was too scared to go to the police. Morgan. She said she'd have the county condemn my house if I talked. She said she'd take everything. She won't take anything. I promised, taking the drive. I'm going to stop her. Please, she begged. Don't let them hurt anyone else. I drove back to the motel, the hard drive sitting on the passenger seat like a radioactive isotope. I plugged it into my laptop. The file was time-stamped, Tuesday, 8:43 p.m. I clicked play. The angle was from across the street, grainy and black and white, but the audio was surprisingly clear. The camera was pointed directly at our living room window. The curtains were open. I watched. I saw my dad sitting in his chair. I saw Morgan pacing. I saw Felix enter the frame. The video confirmed the audio recording, but seeing it was infinitely worse. I saw Felix snatch the crutches. I saw him swing. The first blow knocked my dad out of the chair. He fell hard, sprawling onto the rug. He tried to crawl away, dragging his paralyzed legs. Felix laughed. He actually laughed. He kicked my dad in the ribs, flipping him over. Then he raised the crutch high above his head, like an axe. I flinched as the blow landed. Morgan was in the background. She wasn't looking away. She was watching. She was drinking a glass of wine. Harder, she mouthed. I could read her lips perfectly. Break him. I paused the video. I couldn't watch anymore. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so pure, so white-hot. It felt like it was burning a hole in my chest. I had killed men in combat. I had eliminated targets who were threats to national security. But I had never hated anyone. Not like this. This wasn't just assault. This was torture. This was a son and a wife destroying a man because he was inconvenient, because he was in the way of a payday. I copied the file to 3 separate encrypted cloud servers. Then I sent a copy to my lawyer in New York with a simple instruction: wait for my signal. I picked up my phone. I found Morgan's number. I typed a message. I saw the video, the crutches, the wine glass. I saw it all. I hit send. Then I waited. It took 30 seconds. My phone rang. It was Morgan. I didn't answer. It rang again. And again. Then a text came through. Who is this? I didn't reply. Another text. What do you want? Money? We can pay you. I smiled a cold, dark smile. I don't want your money, I typed back. I bought your debt. I own your house. And soon, I'm going to own you. I set the phone down. The psychological warfare had begun. They wouldn't sleep tonight. They would be wondering who the mystery texter was. They would be turning on each other. I lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling. Sleep well, Dad, I whispered. The cavalry is here. The next morning, the town felt different. The air was heavier, charged with static. Or maybe that was just me. I checked my phone. 17 missed calls from Morgan. From Felix. They were spiraling. Good. I showered, shaved, and put on a clean shirt, still flannel, but crisp. Today, I wasn't just the grieving son. Today, I was the landlord. I drove to the ranch. A sheriff's cruiser was parked in the driveway. Dominic was standing on the porch, talking to Morgan. She looked like a wreck. Her hair was messy, her eyes rimmed with red. She was smoking nervously, gesturing wildly with her hands. I parked and walked up. Hunter. Morgan screeched when she saw me. Thank God. Have you seen any strangers around? Someone is harassing us. Someone sent me threatening texts. Texts? I asked, feigning innocence. What kind of texts? They said they saw things, she stammered, looking at Dominic. Lies. Someone is trying to extort us, Sheriff. You have to trace the number. Dominic looked at me. His eyes were unreadable. We're looking into it, ma'am. It's a burner phone. Hard to trace. What about the bank? Felix stormed out of the house, holding a piece of paper. Mom, look at this. A courier just dropped it off. He shoved the paper at her. Morgan read it. and her face went from pale to gray. She swayed, grabbing the porch railing for support. Foreclosure? She whispered. Notice to vacate in 72 hours. What? I asked, stepping closer. Foreclosure? I thought you said the finances were fine. They are. Morgan shrieked. This is a mistake. Valkyrie Holdings. Who are these people? You can't just kick people out of their home in 3 days. Actually, I said, leaning against the porch post. If the loan contract has an acceleration clause triggered by fraudulent activity or criminal negligence, they can. It's standard in high-risk loans. Morgan's head snapped toward me. How do you know that? I shrugged. I read a lot. This is insane. Felix yelled. I'm not leaving. This is my house. It's Dad's house, I corrected him. And it looks like you lost it. Morgan glared at me, her eyes narrowing. She was starting to put pieces together, but she couldn't quite see the full picture yet. You seem very calm about this, Hunter. Your father is going to be homeless. I'll take care of Dad, I said. Don't worry about him. We need to sell the oil rights. Felix shouted. We need to get to the hospital and make him sign the deed over now, before the bank takes it. No, Dominic said, stepping in. You can't do that. The hospital has restricted visitors for Victor. Doctor's orders. Too much stress. Morgan turned on Dominic. You're supposed to help us. Do something. I can't stop a bank, Morgan, Dominic said, sounding tired. If you don't own the house, you don't own the house. We're not leaving, Felix snarled. Let them try to come in here. I've got guns. That would be a mistake, I said quietly. Felix got in my face again. You shut up. You're happy about this, aren't you? You think you're going to get an inheritance? There's nothing left. We spent it all. He admitted it. In front of the sheriff. Felix. Morgan slapped his arm. Shut up. It's true, Felix yelled, unraveling. The old man was hoarding it. We deserved it. I took care of this place while he sat in that chair feeling sorry for himself. Took care of it. I asked. Is that what you call beating him with his own crutches? The silence that followed was deafening. The wind whistled through the porch railings. Morgan froze. Felix's mouth hung open. Even Dominic stiffened. What did you say? Morgan whispered. I said. I repeated slowly, locking eyes with her. Is that what you call beating him with his crutches? I never said that, Felix stammered. Who told you that? The texts, I said, lying smoothly. The person texting you? They texted me too. Said they have video. Morgan let out a strangled cry. It's a lie. It's a deep fake. AI. Everyone is using AI these days. If it's a lie, you have nothing to worry about, I said. But if it's true, you're not just losing the house. You're going to prison. I turned to leave. I'm going to the hospital. To make sure Dad is safe. From you. I walked back to my truck. As I pulled away, I saw Morgan collapse into a chair, sobbing. Felix was pacing, kicking the porch railing. They were broken. Terrified. But a terrified enemy is dangerous. I drove straight to the hospital. I needed to move Dad. If they were desperate enough to beat him for money, they were desperate enough to kill him to silence a witness. I met Dr. Evans in the hallway. We need to move him, I said without preamble. Now. Move him? Hunter, he's stable. But he's not safe here, I said. I have a private ambulance coming in 10 minutes. I'm moving him to a secure facility in Dallas. You can't just. I have medical power of attorney, I said, pulling a document from my jacket. I had forged it that morning using my old military clearance codes to notarize it. It would hold up long enough. And I'm paying cash. Dr. Evans looked at the document, then at me. Okay, but he needs a nurse during transport. I have a team, I said. 2 men in black scrubs walked around the corner. They weren't nurses. They were ex-SELs from my security firm, Valkyrie. They were large, silent, and very capable. Get him ready, I told them. We moved Dad out the back exit, just as I saw Felix's car screech into the front parking lot. He had come to finish the job. I watched from the ambulance window as Felix ran into the lobby, shouting at the receptionist. Too late, little brother, I thought. The target is secure. Now, the only thing left at the ranch was them. And me. with Dad safe in a private suite in Dallas, guarded by men who could kill with a pencil. I was free to focus entirely on the ranch. The deadline for the eviction was looming. 24 hours left. I knew Morgan and Felix wouldn't leave quietly. Narcissists never do. They believe the world owes them everything, and when reality hits, they lash out violently. I was counting on it. I drove back to the ranch at dusk. The house was dark. No lights. That was a bad sign. It meant they were waiting. I parked my truck at the end of the long driveway and walked up on foot. The wind was picking up, rustling the dry leaves in the yard. It was a perfect night for an ambush. I didn't go to the front door. I circled around to the barn. This was my terrain. I knew every loose board, every creaky hinge. I slipped inside the barn, the smell of hay and oil filling my nose. I climbed the ladder to the hayloft. From here, I had a perfect view of the back porch through a high window. I saw them. They were sitting on the back steps. Felix had a shotgun across his lap. Morgan was holding a flashlight, but it was off. They were whispering. "He'll come back," Felix said. "He has to check the house. When he walks in, boom. We can't just shoot him, Felix." Morgan hissed. "It has to look like self-defense. Like he broke in." "He is breaking in," Felix argued. "It's our house until tomorrow. If he comes on the property, he's a trespasser. I'll blow his head off and tell the sheriff he attacked me. Just make sure he's dead," Morgan said coldly. "No comas this time. No loose ends." I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. Not fear. Disgust. She was talking about killing me, her stepson, like she was discussing exterminating a rat. I pulled out my phone. I connected to the smart home system I had installed years ago for Dad, a system they didn't know how to use or even disable. I tapped a button, floodlights on. Click. The backyard was instantly bathed in blinding white light. Felix yelped, throwing his hands up to shield his eyes. Morgan screamed. I tapped another button, speakers, max volume. Looking for someone? My voice boomed through the outdoor speakers, distorted and loud. Felix scrambled for the shotgun, spinning in circles, trying to see past the glare. "Hunter, I know that's you. Come out and fight like a man." "You want to talk about being a man?" I said into the mic app on my phone. "A man doesn't beat his disabled father. A man doesn't hide behind his mother's skirt." "Shut up." Felix fired a round blindly into the dark. Boom. The buckshot tore through the leaves of an oak tree. "Felix, stop wasting ammo." Morgan yelled. "You have until sunrise," I announced. "Leave the keys on the table. Walk away. If you're still here when the sun comes up, the eviction becomes physical. We're not going anywhere." Morgan shrieked at the unseen voice. "This is my home." "It was never your home," I replied. "You were just a parasite." I cut the feed. Then I cut the power. The lights died instantly. They were plunged back into total darkness. I heard Felix cursing, stumbling over a patio chair. I slipped out of the barn and melted into the woods. I didn't need to engage them yet. I wanted them tired. I wanted them paranoid. I wanted them to spend the whole night staring at the shadows, jumping at every twig snap. Sleep deprivation is a powerful weapon. By morning, their reaction times would be slowed, their judgment impaired. I went back to my truck and drove a mile down the road, parking in a hidden cutout. I reclined the seat and closed my eyes for a 20-minute combat nap. I would be rested. They would be exhausted. The next morning, the sun rose blood red over the Texas plains. I drove up the driveway at exactly 8 a.m. The sheriff's car was there again. But this time, there were two other cars, unmarked sedans. I frowned. That wasn't part of the plan. I got out. Dominic was there, but so were two men in suits. They looked like lawyers. Or feds. Morgan was standing on the porch, looking smug. She had dark circles under her eyes, but she was smiling. "You're trespassing," she called out as I approached. "It's 8 a.m., I said. "Time's up." Actually, one of the suits stepped forward. He had a slimy smile. "Mr. Hunter Sterling?" "I represent Mrs. Sterling. We filed an emergency injunction with Judge Oliver." "An injunction?" I asked. claiming predatory lending practices and illegal harassment, the lawyer said. The judge has granted a temporary stay of the foreclosure. And he handed me a paper, a restraining order against you. You are to stay 500 yards away from this property and from my client. I looked at the paper. Judge Oliver. Of course. The most corrupt judge in the county. Morgan must have promised him a cut of the oil money. You bought a judge, I said flatly. I sought justice, Morgan said, crossing her arms. Now get off my land before the sheriff arrests you. Dominic looked at me. He looked ashamed, but he put his hand on his holster. You have to go, Hunter. Court order. I looked at Felix. He was grinning, holding the shotgun loosely in one hand. Bye-bye, soldier boy. Don't let the door hit you. I felt the anger rising, a tidal wave of violence wanting to break free. I could take them all. Right now. The lawyer, the sheriff, Felix. It would be easy, but it wouldn't be victory. It would be prison. I took a deep breath. Okay, I said. I'll leave. Good boy, Felix laughed. I turned and walked back to my truck. I had tried the legal way. I had tried the financial way. They had blocked me with corruption. They thought they had won. They thought the piece of paper from Judge Oliver was a shield. They were wrong. The law had failed. Plan B it is, I whispered as I started the engine. I wasn't a civilian anymore. I wasn't a businessman. I was a ranger, and I was done playing by their rules. I drove straight to the county courthouse. If Judge Oliver was the shield protecting them, I needed to shatter it. The courthouse was an old brick building that smelled of dust and indifference. I walked past the metal detectors. My knife was left in the truck and went straight to the clerk's office. I need to see Judge Oliver, I told the woman behind the glass. Do you have an appointment? She asked, not looking up from her crossword puzzle. Tell him Hunter Sterling is here. Tell him I know about the oil rights. Her pen stopped moving. She looked up, eyes wide. 1 moment. 2 minutes later, I was ushered into Oliver's chambers. It was a plush office, mahogany desk, leather chairs, too expensive for a public servant's salary. Oliver was a fat man with a red face and nervous eyes. He was sweating. Mr. Sterling, he said, trying to sound authoritative but failing. You shouldn't be here. You're violating a restraining order by approaching the protected party's legal counsel. I'm not here about Morgan, I said, closing the door behind me. I didn't sit down. I stood over his desk, looming. I'm here about you. Me? He chuckled nervously. I know you granted the stay of foreclosure because Morgan promised you a percentage of the mineral rights sale, I said. I also know about the offshore account in the Caymans where you hide your bribes. Oliver Consulting LLC, right? His face drained of color. That's preposterous. I'm a judge. You're a crook, I said. And I have the transaction logs. I have the emails between you and Morgan's lawyer. I placed a folder on his desk. It was empty, just blank paper inside, but he didn't know that. It was a bluff. A ranger's bluff. Here is the deal, I said softly. You lift the restraining order. You lift the stay on the foreclosure. And you sign a warrant for Felix's arrest based on the assault video I'm about to email to the DA. Oliver stared at the folder. His hands were shaking. He reached for it. I slammed my hand down on top of it. Wham! He jumped. Do we have a deal? I asked. He swallowed hard. I can't just reverse a ruling in an hour. It takes time. Procedures. You have 1 hour, I said. Or this folder goes to the FBI and the IRS. Okay, he squeaked. Okay, I'll do it. Just give me until noon. Noon, I said. If I don't see the order lifted by 12:01, you're finished. I walked out of the office, feeling a grim satisfaction. The system was rigged, but fear was a universal currency, and I was rich in it. I went back to my truck and waited. 11 a.m. passed. 11:30 a.m. passed. At 11:45 a.m., my phone rang. It wasn't Oliver. It was Dominic. Hunter, Dominic's voice was urgent. Where are you? Courthouse, I said. Why? Get out of there, Dominic hissed. Oliver didn't file the paperwork. He called Morgan. He told her everything. She's panicked, Hunter. She's doing something crazy. What is she doing? I demanded. She and Felix, they took your dad's truck. They went to the workshop. They said if they can't have the ranch, no one can. They're going to burn it down. Hunter. The workshop, the house, everything. My dad built that workshop. I said, my voice turning to ice. There's more, Dominic said, and his voice broke. They dug up your mom's rose garden. They're destroying everything he loves to spite him. I hung up. I didn't care about the folder anymore. I didn't care about the judge. They were destroying my mother's garden. They were burning my father's legacy. I started the truck. The engine roared. I wasn't going to the ranch to serve papers. I wasn't going there to talk. I reached under the seat and pulled out the hard case I had kept locked until now. I popped the latches. Inside lay my tactical vest, my gloves, and a beautifully crafted, recurved bow, silent, deadly, and legal to carry. I didn't want to use a gun. A gun was too quick. A gun was too impersonal. I drove toward the ranch. The speedometer climbed. 90, 100. I saw the smoke rising above the tree line before I even got there. Black, oily smoke. They had started the fire. You want a war? I whispered, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. You got one. I pulled off the main road a mile out, crashing through a fence and driving across the pasture to approach from the rear. I killed the engine in a ravine behind the barn. I got out. I strapped on the vest. I slid the knife into its sheath. I strung the bow. I moved through the tall grass, a predator in his element. I reached the edge of the clearing. The workshop, a beautiful timber-framed building where Dad had taught me to use a saw, was engulfed in flames. The heat was intense. In front of the fire, silhouetted against the inferno, stood Felix. He was swinging a sledgehammer, smashing the stone fountain in the center of Mom's garden. Morgan was cheering him on, holding a gas can. Burn it all, she screamed, her face twisted in a manic grin. If we can't have it, he gets nothing. Nothing. They were laughing. They were celebrating the destruction of my family's soul. I knocked an arrow. I drew the string back to my cheek. I took a breath, slowing my heart rate. Focus. Release. The arrow flew silent and true. Thwack. It didn't hit Felix. I wasn't trying to kill him. Not yet. The arrow slammed into the handle of the sledgehammer just as he raised it for another swing. The impact shattered the wood, sending the heavy iron head flying inches from his face. Felix screamed, dropping the splintered handle, scrambling back. What the hell? He yelled, looking around wildly. Morgan spun around, dropping the gas can. Who's there? I stepped out of the smoke. The fire from the workshop roared behind me, casting long, dancing shadows. I held the bow loosely in my left hand. I didn't say a word. I just walked toward them. It's him, Morgan shrieked. Shoot him, Felix. Shoot him. Felix fumbled for the shotgun leaning against the porch railing. He brought it up, his hands shaking. Stay back, he screamed. I'll kill you. I swear to God. I didn't stop. I kept walking, my pace steady, rhythmic. Thud, thud, thud. You had a chance to leave, I said, my voice cutting through the crackle of the fire. You had a chance to walk away with your freedom. I said stop. Felix fired. Boom. He missed. The spread of buckshot kicked up dirt 5 feet to my left. He was panicking, jerking the trigger. I didn't flinch. I reached over my shoulder and pulled another arrow. That was your warning shot, I said. Felix racked the slide. Click-clack. He aimed again. I drew the bow. This time, I didn't aim for the weapon. I aimed for the shoulder. Release. The arrow whistled through the air. It struck Felix in the fleshy part of his right shoulder, pinning him to the wooden post of the porch behind him. Aya! Felix howled, dropping the gun. He clawed at the arrow, pinned like a butterfly. Morgan screamed, a sound of pure terror. She looked at the gun on the ground, then at me. She made a move for it. Don't, I said. She froze. I walked up to the porch steps. The heat from the burning workshop was intense on my back, but I felt cold inside. Cold and sharp. I looked at Felix, who was sobbing, blood seeping through his shirt. You like hurting helpless people? I asked. You like using tools to break bone? I reached down and picked up the crutches, my dad's new titanium ones that Morgan had thrown onto the lawn. Please, Felix begged, snot running down his face. Please, Hunter. We're family. Family. I repeated. You beat my father until he was in a coma. You tried to steal his home. You burned his legacy. I tossed the crutches aside. I didn't need them. I'm not going to beat you with crutches, Felix, I said. That's what cowards do. I stepped onto the porch. I'm going to dismantle you. Piece by piece. Morgan tried to run past me. I caught her arm without looking, gripping it tight enough to bruise. I shoved her back toward the wall. You watch, I ordered her. You wanted to watch the show? You wanted to watch him hurt my dad. Now you watch this. Hunter, please. Morgan cried. I'll give you everything. The house. The money. Just let us go. You have nothing to give, I said. I already own it all. I turned back to Felix. He was trying to pull the arrow out. Let me help you with that, I said. I grabbed the arrow shaft. No, no, no. Felix screamed. I snapped the shaft. He passed out from the pain for a second, his head lolling forward. I looked at Morgan. She was trembling so hard her teeth were chattering. This is justice, I told her. Cinematic justice. I grabbed Felix by his collar and slapped him awake. Wake up, I growled. We're just getting started. Then, I heard sirens. Lots of them. Dominic. But I wasn't done. The law was too slow. The law had failed. I had about 3 minutes before the deputies swarmed the place. 3 minutes to settle the score for every bruise on my father's body. I balled my fist. Felix's eyes fluttered open, filled with a primal terror. He looked at me, then at the blood on his shoulder, then back at me. He realized there was no escape. Get up, I said. He whimpered, sliding down the post. I can't, my shoulder. My dad couldn't walk, I reminded him. Didn't stop you. I grabbed him by the front of his shirt and hauled him to his feet. He swung a clumsy, desperate punch at my face. I blocked it effortlessly, catching his wrist. Crack. I twisted. His wrist snapped with a sound like a dry branch breaking. Felix shrieked, his knees buckling. That's one, I said calmly. Morgan was screaming, huddled in the corner. Stop it. You're killing him. I'm not killing him, I said. I'm educating him. Felix tried to kick me. I sidestepped and kicked the inside of his knee. The joint hyperextended backward with a sickening pop. He collapsed, screaming in agony, clutching his leg. That's for the left leg, I said. He was on the ground now, writhing in the dirt. He was broken, physically and mentally. The bully had met the wolf. I stood over him. The fire from the workshop was raging now, the heat blistering. The sirens were getting louder, closing in fast. Please. Felix gasped, tears and snot mixing with the dirt on his face. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Sorry doesn't fix a brain bleed, I said. Sorry doesn't rebuild a life. I looked at his other leg, the one that was still whole. Don't, he whispered. I stomped. Hard. His right tibia shattered. The scream he let out was not human. It was the sound of an animal caught in a trap. He curled into a fetal position, sobbing uncontrollably. I stepped back, breathing hard. My hands were steady. My pulse was elevated, but controlled. I looked at Morgan. She wasn't screaming anymore. She was staring at me in horror, her hands covering her mouth. She had wet herself. You're a monster, she whispered. No, I said, pointing at the burning workshop. That is the work of monsters. I am the consequence. I heard tires crunching on gravel, doors slamming, voices shouting. Sheriff's department. Drop the weapon. I turned slowly. Dominic was there, gun drawn. Behind him were 4 deputies, all with weapons raised. And behind them was a news van. Channel 5. I smiled. Perfect. I raised my hand slowly. I didn't have a weapon. The bow was on the ground. It's over, Dominic, I called out. Get on the ground, Hunter. Dominic yelled, his voice shaking. He saw Felix on the porch, a broken heap of limbs. He saw the arrow. He saw the fire. On the ground. Now, I knelt down, interlacing my fingers behind my head. He attacked me, I said loudly for the cameras. He had a shotgun. I defended myself. defended yourself? Dominic shouted, gesturing at Felix. You broke every bone in his body. He wouldn't stay down, I said simply. The deputies rushed forward. They handcuffed me roughly, pushing my face into the dirt. I didn't resist. I let them haul me up. As they walked me past the porch, the paramedics were swarming Felix. He was conscious, barely. He's crazy. Felix was sobbing to the EMTs. He tried to kill me. I stopped. The deputy tried to shove me forward, but I planted my feet. I looked at Felix one last time. Remember this pain? I said. Every time it rains, and your knees ache, remember why? They shoved me into the back of the cruiser. Through the window, I saw the reporter from Channel 5 running toward Morgan. She was hysterical, crying about how her stepson was a psycho. But then, I saw another car pull up. A sleek, black limousine. The back door opened. A woman in a sharp gray suit stepped out. She walked with purpose, holding a briefcase. It was Brooke, my chief legal counsel from New York. She walked straight past the sheriff, straight past the cameras, and tapped on the window of the police car. She smiled at me through the glass. Nice work, boss, she mouthed. We'll have you out by dinner. I leaned back against the hard plastic seat. The adrenaline was fading, leaving a deep exhaustion. But as I watched the firemen spraying water on the burning workshop, I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Peace. The threat was neutralized. The message was sent. Now came the final battle. The one fought with suits and statutes. The interrogation room was cold, sterile, and smelled of stale coffee. Dominic sat across from me, looking like he hadn't slept in a week. He slammed a file on the metal table. Aggravated assault with a deadly weapon. Arson. Attempted murder. Dominic read from the sheet. He looked up at me, shaking his head. You really did it, didn't you, Hunter? You came back to burn it all down. I didn't start the fire, Dominic, I said calmly. And I didn't initiate the violence. Felix fired first. Twice. We found the shotgun, Dominic admitted. Discharged twice. But the arrow in his shoulder? The shattered knees? That's excessive force, Hunter. That's torture. No jury is going to buy self-defense. That depends on the jury, a voice said from the doorway. Brooke walked in. She didn't look like she belonged in a small-town Texas police station. She looked like a shark in a tailored suit. She placed her briefcase on the table and sat down next to me. Sheriff Dominic, she said smoothly. I represent Mr. Sterling, and I suggest you drop these charges before I file a federal lawsuit against your department for corruption, evidence tampering, and collusion. Dominic scoffed. Corruption? You're bluffing, lady. Am I? Brooke opened her briefcase. She pulled out a tablet and slid it across the table. On the screen was a bank transfer. Sender, Morgan Sterling. Recipient, Dominic Miller. Amount, $15,000. Dominic's face went white. And here, Brooke slid another document. Judge Oliver's resignation letter. He signed it 20 minutes ago after we showed him his own Cayman Island accounts. He's cooperating with the FBI now. He's very talkative. Dominic looked at me. His eyes were wide with panic. Hunter, I needed the money. My wife. I don't care, I said. You let them hurt my dad. You covered it up. You have two choices, Sheriff, Brooke said. 1. You press charges against my client. We go to trial. We expose everything. You go to prison for 10 years. She paused. 2. You accept the video evidence we have of Felix assaulting Victor Sterling. You charge Felix and Morgan with attempted murder, elder abuse, and insurance fraud. You rule my client's actions as defense of property and self-defense under the Castle Doctrine. And then you resign. Dominic stared at the table. He was sweating profusely. He knew he was checkmated. The video, he whispered. You have it. Clear as day, I said. And the audio of them plotting to burn the workshop. It's all recorded. Dominic closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. Okay, he said. Okay, I'll write it up. Good choice, Brooke said, snapping her briefcase shut. We're leaving now. We walked out of the station into a sea of flashing cameras. The story had gone national. Billionaire ranger defends disabled father from abusive family. The narrative had shifted. I wasn't the psycho anymore. I was the hero. I didn't stop for interviews. I got into the limo with Brooke. "How is he?" I asked as soon as the door closed. "Victor." Brooke smiled. "He's good. The doctors in Dallas say the swelling is going down. He's asking for you." "And the ranch?" "The fire destroyed the workshop," she said softly. "But the house is standing. And the land? The land is yours, Hunter. The foreclosure went through this morning. Morgan and Felix have been evicted." "Where are they?" "Felix is in the hospital under police guard. He's going to need multiple surgeries." "He'll never walk without a cane again," Brooks said. "Morgan is in a holding cell. She's being charged with conspiracy to commit murder." I leaned my head back. "Take me to the hospital. I need to see Felix." "Hunter," Brooke warned. "I'm not going to hurt him," I said. "I just need to say goodbye." An hour later, I walked into Felix's hospital room. His legs were in casts, elevated in slings. His arm was pinned. He looked small, broken. He opened his eyes when I walked in. He flinched. "You?" he rasped. "Relax," I said. "I'm just here to give you some news." I stood at the foot of his bed. "The DA is offering a plea deal," I said. 15 years. "If you testify against your mother." Felix's eyes widened. "What?" "She's already trying to pin it all on you." I lied. "She told the cops she was scared of you, that you forced her to help." It wasn't true, but I knew Felix. He was paranoid. He was selfish. "That bitch," Felix hissed. "She told me to do it. She told me to break his legs." "Then you better tell the police that," I said, "before she cuts a deal and leaves you to rot." I turned to leave. "Hunter," he called out. I stopped. "Why didn't you just kill me?" he asked. His voice was trembling. I looked back at him. "Because death is easy. Living with what you are? That's hard." I walked out. I went down the hall to the ICU waiting room where Morgan was being treated for shock before her transfer to county jail. She was sitting in a wheelchair, handcuffed to the armrest. She looked up. Her eyes were hollow. "You won," she whispered. "I didn't win," I said. "I just cleaned up the mess." "What happens to me?" she asked. "You go to prison," I said. "And when you get out, if you ever get out, you have nothing. No money, no house, no family." She started to cry. Real tears this time. Tears of self-pity. "I just wanted security," she sobbed. "I just wanted to be safe." "You had security," I said. "You had a husband who loved you. You had a home. But it wasn't enough. You wanted more." I leaned in close. "Greed is a heavy burden, Morgan. Hope you can carry it." I turned and walked away, her sobs echoing in the hallway. The war was over. The enemy was destroyed. Now, it was time to rebuild. 6 months later. The Texas sun felt different now. It didn't feel scorching or oppressive. It felt warm. Healing. I sat on the edge of the newly built dock, my boots dangling just above the water of the lake. The air smelled of pine and fresh sawdust. Behind me, the sound of a hammer striking wood echoed through the trees. I turned to look. My dad, Victor, was standing, yes, standing, at his workbench. His legs were encased in state-of-the-art carbon fiber braces, a prototype from one of my biotech companies. He moved slower than before, with a slight mechanical whir every time he took a step, but he was upright. He was working on a piece of oak, sanding it with a focus I hadn't seen in years. The new workshop was bigger than the old one. Better tools, better light. But we had kept one thing, the scorched stone foundation of the original. We built on top of the scars, not over them. A reminder that we survived the fire. "You're staring again, son," Dad called out without looking up. "Just making sure you don't overdo it." I smiled. "I'm fine," he grunted, blowing sawdust off the wood. "Doctor said I need to build muscle. What better way than building a rocking chair?" He turned and limped over to me, leaning on a cane, not a crutch. Never a crutch again. He sat down next to me on the dock. We watched a hawk circle overhead. "You hear from them?" Dad asked quietly. I nodded. Sentencing was yesterday. He didn't look at me. He just watched the water. "And Felix took the plea," I said. "He testified against Morgan. He got 15 years. He'll be in a wheelchair for the rest of his life in a cell. And Morgan? Life without parole, I said. The jury didn't like the audio recordings, or the fact that she tried to liquidate your assets while you were in a coma. Dad let out a long, slow breath. It was the sound of a weight finally being lifted off his chest. I loved her once, you know, he said softly. Or, I thought I did. I was lonely after your mom passed. I didn't see the snake in the grass. Snakes are good at hiding, Dad, I said, putting a hand on his shoulder. That's why you need a ranger to spot them. He chuckled, patting my hand. I'm glad you came back, Hunter. I'm sorry I pushed you away all those years ago. I thought you were running away from responsibility. I admitted. But I found something else out there. I found out who I was. You're a good man, Dad said, his eyes tearing up. A dangerous man, but a good one. I'm retired now, I said. Valkyrie Holdings runs itself. I'm thinking of staying here, expanding the ranch, maybe starting a program for disabled vets, a place where they can come, heal, learn to build things again. Dad smiled, a real, genuine smile that reached his eyes. I'd like that. I'd like that a lot. We sat there in silence as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. The nightmare was over. The house was ours. The town was clean. Sheriff Dominic had resigned and moved 2 states away, and a new, honest sheriff had taken over. We had won. Not just the battle, but the war for our future. I looked at my dad, working his way back to strength, refusing to be broken. That was the real victory. They tried to take his dignity. They tried to take his legacy. Instead, they just made us stronger. Closing thoughts. You know, they say you can choose your friends, but you can't choose your family. But sometimes, family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up when the house is on fire. It's about who stands by you when you can't stand on your own. I have a question for you. If you were in Hunter's shoes, if you had the power and the money, would you have shown Felix mercy? Or would you have finished him right there on the porch? Let me know in the comments. It's a tough one. Also, I'm really curious. What kind of stories do you want to hear next on Betrayal Stories Lab? Do you want more military revenge thrillers? Or maybe stories about workplace betrayal or unfaithful partners getting caught? Tell me exactly what you love, and I'll write it for you. And hey, if this story kept you on the edge of your seat, please do me a huge favor. Gently tap that like button and subscribe. It helps more than you know. Until the next epic revenge, stay safe and protect your own. See you soon.